Hello everyone, welcome to today's panel sponsored by Snapfingers. Today we have Sam, founder of Arweave, Phil, founder of Arweave, and Kayla, creative director of Koi. It's a great pleasure to have you guys here. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, really excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise, very excited to feature you guys. Today our topic is actually to decipher Arweave. I know you have a lot of things going on in your ecosystem, the block with the permaweb, but today we're just covering the tip of the iceberg, but we try to do as much as we can. So just before we start, could you briefly introduce yourself and your project to our audience, just in case they don't know that much about Arweave? So let's start with Sam then.
I would guess I was the originator of Arweave. Yeah, I still work very closely with the founding team, but also with lots and lots of different people in the ecosystem building out the various areas that we're exploring. I think Arweave in the basic sense can be seen as a permanent information storage system. So the idea is to build a different type of data replication network where it's backed by an endowment rather than backed by contracts. So typically when you procure services to store data, you do so for a set period of time. Arweave works the other way around. You say, okay, I want to store a piece of data, and instead of having it for a set period, I want to store it literally indefinite. And we do this using an endowment structure. So this is what Arweave is at the base layer. On top of this is what we call the permaweb, which is all of that information made available in web browsers. And it goes, from everything from like documents to videos, large files, as well as applications as well. And that's kind of where the growing ecosystem of applications around the network that are using this permanent storage either as part of their product offering. So in the sense of Arweave is, Phil will tell you about it, but it's a permanent file storage dropper application. It's very, very easy to use. It allows people to just replicate their information forever, simply. So in the case of Phil, it's core part of the offering of the product. But in the case of Kayla and Koi, they're using Arweave's properties to do other kind of technically useful things to enable the product in the kind of back-end way. But I think we can get into that in SmartWeave and everything that goes with it later.
Awesome. So I remember when I reached out to you, you said like Arweave is way beyond storage. So that's the application side come along with it. So how about you, Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. My name's Phil, longtime Arweave fan, both of the technology and Sam and his team. Right, I kind of found him in early 2018, jumped on the test net, and kind of the rest is history for me. I ended up leaving my job as an infrastructure and solutions architect at KPMG to found Arweave, right, and the profit sharing community behind it. And that was last summer, towards the end of the summer. And that was also facilitated by the other great things Sam and the team are doing with the Open Web Foundry and some of those application building events they're doing. But yeah, so Arweave, our mission is really simple. We want to get that permanent storage into the hands of everyone around the world. All right, we're doing that by creating really intuitive apps that let you upload, download, share, your files, and that could be public or private. And we're using best encryption for all that private data. And it's all started on Arweave, right? So there's no monthly fees. You'll be able to recover that data for free for the next 200 years, right? Early this summer, we finished our seed round. We were able to raise a bit of funds. We've been focusing on expanding the team and bringing the next wave of features, apps, and integrations to the Arweave community. So really happy to be here and talk more about Arweave and the ecosystem.
Thanks, Phil. I'm pretty sure that leaving KPMG to join Arweave is quite a worthwhile moment, and to keep storage for 200 years and more. So yeah, how about you? Kayla.
My name is Kayla. It's wonderful to be here. I'm really excited about, again, Sam he helped us get our feet off the ground at Koi. He helped actually write our initial white paper and was one of the first major proponents of our project. So we are forever grateful to him and just the Arweave ecosystem that is allowing us to do what we are trying to do. I'm the creative director, and we just launched a prototype for our proprietary protocol about 4 weeks ago. We have almost 10,000 users already on that prototype. We're seeing 200 uploads per day and have earned upwards of 100,000, or our users have earned 100,000 Koi tokens already. And we're approaching 1 million views on Koi NFTs. And all of that is because of the network that Sam has built and the allowing data files to be stored in NFTs with their contract. So the prototype that I'm talking about is an NFT wallet. And And the idea that now we can store those contracts together for at least 200 years, as Phil mentioned, so that ownership is never lost and can never be separated, like the transaction from the media file, is just an incredible revolution and the building blocks of the future of the decentralized internet.
Thanks, Kayla. I'm pretty sure 10,000 users is actually a lot for the crypto, like actual users. Yeah, we're going to dive more into NFTs later, so definitely touch on your topic. Let's start with the first question. AR, the native token of Arweave, has witnessed its own price surging up by roughly 336.9%, which has successfully gained much attention within the industry. However, besides this brilliant performance of the AR price, decentralized storage still sounds a very abstract and unknown topic for a lot of people. So what is exactly Arweave and the ecosystem? Can you talk about your personal understanding towards it and briefly introduce your consensus mechanism of the project? Sam, would you mind to start? I think you briefly touched it on your introduction, but yeah, you can elaborate more.
Sure. So the consensus mechanism of Arweave is something we call succinct proofs of random access, which has sort of evolved over the last couple of years. It started as proofs of access, then succinct proofs of access, and now succinct proofs of random access. But basically, the idea is to have a proof of work-like system that stresses data storage and storage of a useful data set rather than random work. So the way that this works in Arweave at the moment, and there's a couple of tweaks we want to make to it, but broadly the principle is that when you want to make a guess in the mining process, so you know that in proof of work, say in Bitcoin, you take a random number, you hash it with the data you're trying to add as a block, and then you check this against a kind of mathematical property, and if it succeeds, which is very, very rare, then you can mine the block, and if it doesn't, then you don't. But what this does, of course, is it just burns electricity. So what we do in Arweave's case is slightly different. We take a hash, and we use that to point to a random byte in the network. And then we have to recall that byte, and we do this using a system of Merkle proofs, 3 layers of Merkle proofs on top of each other. Yes, to recall that data and to prove that you have access to it, or rather prove where in the network that data is, and then hash that again, and then you see whether that satisfies your mathematical property, which is again very rare. And so this means that in order to mine, you have to store more data, and the more data you store, the more efficient you are at mining. So you can choose to replicate exactly how much data you want in Arweave. And in fact, you can actually choose what data to store. So if you want to apply a content policy on top of your storage, you can do so and it doesn't hurt you. Or rather, you are incentivized for every byte that you store, but you can also just choose not to if you want. That's totally fine. Yes, and so that's the kind of base principle of how the consensus mechanism works. It's sort of, I would say, it's iterating towards complete now. There's not too much left to do to it. There's stuff we want to do to make sure that, for example, hard drives, spinning disk platters as NVMe drives. There's no need to incentivize super fast access to disks. That's a kind of separate conversation. So, I mean, the interesting thing about the Arweave ecosystem, though, I think, is that it's layers on layers on layers at this point. So I'm particularly interested in, for example, what Koi are building at the exact opposite end of the stack, where they're building in this smart contracting system that exists on top of Arweave, using Arweave's data storage and, as Kayla described, the atomic nature of association between contracts and data on Arweave. And so that's essentially that the contract itself is stored with the data. They are one and the same thing. You can refer to them by the same ID. So they're using this property to do something really cool, which is attention tracking markets, essentially betting on where attention will be placed in the future. And in doing so, building a different incentive model for this web that we're building on top of the Arweave network. Maybe that's a good jumping in point, Kayla, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and to that point, so attention tracking, we think, is the future. We call attention is the asset, because that's really the only valuable thing that we have. But to build a little bit more on how the consensus mechanism works, we use a gradual consensus process, because most blockchain projects right now think that the faster you come to consensus is better, which certainly has applications for some things like financial transactions, where like the prices are so volatile, you do want fast confirmation times. With most of the things that we're working on, again, focusing on that attention, let's, for example, say we have a decentralized social media site. If I like your post, it doesn't really matter if that is written to the chain when I do it, or 20 seconds after I do it, or tomorrow, as long as that's reflected in the UI. And as the creative director, I have a big focus in user experience. And so we have a bundler system where our bundlers will reflect interactions that you have. But then after like an audit period happens and they vote and that's been audited that all of the votes are correct by all of the nodes in our network who are submitting their proofs. This is what the task that happened. So they'll submit to the chain after that audit period passes. And then tomorrow it will show, I liked that post that you made. Whereas like we can show that in the UI without having to make it like on chain immediately, which can help speed up all of the systems generally because we're using that bundler, but also it makes it much more affordable. And Arweave's costs are so low right now, which is like revolutionary for the NFT industry, is what we're focusing on now. But also if we can group all those transactions together and write them to the chain at the same time, Arweave's system just makes it affordable and easy without like having to spend a lot of electricity with proof of work or stake a bunch of tokens with proof of stake. And it just like makes a simpler process for everyone.
Thanks, Kayla. Phil, do you have anything to add on? Or
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to talk about consensus mechanisms because at Arweave we don't have any. We, as Sam was saying, we're more of an application, and yeah, we haven't built our own specific consensus mechanism. With that said, I think we do use some different properties of Arweave outside of just an application. So we are also a profit sharing community. So we have a DAO that is built using SmartWeave and contracts on SmartWeave. So our community members can participate in some of the governance and some of the aspects that happen as we create our drive. For example, creating burning tokens, a profit sharing token, or voting on things like fees, application fees. So we're trying to leverage our community, not just as kind of users of our app, but also as a voice to, drive the creation of the app itself. And then we also do have, I guess it's kind of like this mini protocol / information architecture that we've labeled Arweave file system. So again, it's not a consensus mechanism. Rather, this is more of a means of adding on to the kinds of transactions that Arweave already gives us. So if you look at Arweave kind of out of the box, there's no concept of a file system. There's no folders or files. You can't move things or visualize, block data like files. So at our drive, right, we're like the file sharing application, and we needed a way for users to interact with the Weave like it was their file explorer on their desktop. So we created ARFs or ARFS, this file system, which is really a way we tag all of our transactions, and a way we query for those transactions, and a way we encrypt the data. So that's another piece that's kind of not available out of the box, so to speak, with Arweave, is really patterns for encrypting data and transacting on the network. So that was another piece that we had to build. Not saying we created our own encryption mechanisms or anything like that, but that was something that we wanted to include, in the spec for our file system. So so that's definitely kind of our core protocol, the thing that really lets our drive work. And we're exploring building that into friendlier libraries for other developers to use. Because we initially built it really just for our drive's purpose, and we quickly realized that that wasn't flexible enough for other teams. There's been such a huge surge in development activity in Arweave in general. People are always looking for new ways to upload data and get content onto the platform. So we're retooling our own libraries to make it easier for everybody to use the Arweave file system and get their data into our drive. So not to say one day we won't have our own consensus mechanism, our own special kind of software, node software for our drive. But right now we're more focused at the application level.
And I just want to jump in real quick and say, like he's talking about more like other developers using their system, and that includes us at Koi, and being able to use their file storage and have large file NFTs is going to be like really the next wave of what we're working on. So we're very grateful also to Arweave and Phil for helping us do that.
Yeah, I think that kind of points to the composability of the whole stack. So what's really crazy is that all of these services by default, because they run inside the system where all of the data opens, all the services are open too. And so you can just arbitrarily build on top of other people's stuff, and this innovation, as they call it, which is super powerful. Like, it started a while ago with, I think the first one was something called Arweave ID, where someone just made this application where you could go along and set your name on the permaweb and it associates with your wallet address. And you couldn't do anything else on the application, but every other application in the ecosystem could read out that data and use it. Now you have kind of data composability, we call it, kind of an analog to financial composability of DeFi. You get data and information. across all of the applications in the space, which is super, super interesting. And I think we'll probably see that come to fruition optimistically in 6 months. But I think 5 years from now, what you can do with that property is going to be crazy. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and we're working on that right now, actually, creating template for other developers, like plug and play, use all the pieces that we've already created to be able to build other apps on Arweave and use Arweave's data system. So not just like for us to use, but for any developer who wants to come in, they can, all of our templates are in JavaScript. So it's super easy for you don't have to be a Web3 or like a blockchain developer. You can be just any developer who knows JavaScript, come in, build your own app, run it on Arweave, make something new and crazy.
Even the attention tracking stuff is just associated with a transaction ID. So it goes for any piece of data on Arweave, which means Phil could integrate it. We spoke about this if you wanted to. For example, if you're building a social media network on top of Arweave, you just hook in a few lines of code, and now you have Koi attention rewards for all of the pieces of data in your social network. And so people now have an incentive to create content that gets attention. And that's a super powerful way of amplifying the incentives around your social network. But that's just like one tiny example. This goes across the entire stack of apps.
Well, and the incentives, I think, are very, the reason people don't use blockchain in the wider internet is because the incentives aren't aligned properly. And if we can get people, there are people who go viral on Twitter and don't get rewarded for that. Or there are people who, post really great art and people come and look at it at online galleries, but it doesn't really mean anything unless somebody actually buys it. But we're revolutionizing that. And so if we're building the social networks or anything, social media or any other kind of app that people want to be using, there's an incentive for anyone, even if you don't really know about blockchain, to come into that space. So we have a natural growth opportunity there for people to earn just because they're funny and they make good tweets, basically, which is, nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's unbelievably powerful. I think it will change the way that the web is structured eventually. I think there's obvious clear upsides to it, which 100% behind it. And there's also kind of interesting potential side effects from this that we're going to have to work out how to temper. And I think we probably do this in the UIs of the applications or that kind of thing. But if you make it too easy for people to make lots of money, to some extent, they just focus on this. And one wonders how that plays with the different kinds of applications that we have on the web. That's a long-term problem, I think.
I think to that, this is sort of a bigger problem, but so many jobs are getting, wiped out by AI and computers and autonomous vehicles, for example. At least in the US, there's so many people who drive as a living. And if this is a way that you can support yourself by making art or creating something or sharing your thoughts with the world, we have this big upcoming problem of people not being enough jobs. And so if making art is the way that we can give that back to people, I think that's the future that I see. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, the first question, I've got lots of information. So just want to say for the audience, if they want to know more about Spora, which is things get very interesting about it, the mechanism of Arweave. So definitely check out Arweave's website to learn more about it, because that's kind of the core of the underlying mechanism that supports Arweave, and definitely a lot of things going on with Rdrive and Koi about how those projects can align together with Arweave to make data composability work and to make attention attraction to help more people to creating opportunities for people who sharing data or doing content on top of the network. So the next question is, as we mentioned in the previous question, AR's price has hit its new all-time high recently. Besides, the Arweave ecosystem usage has reached this all-time high. According to the statistics, the number of AR tokens being spent on ecosystem applications has grown exponentially this week. And Arweave's total data store has increased to 11 terabytes. Arweave is now the number 2 ranking Web3 project by revenue on the index leaderboard, ahead of the Graph, while Filecoin saw an 8% downturn. The increase of the expanding Arweave ecosystem can likely be attributed to its growing popularity as a way to cheaply and permanently store NFT assets. So have you thought that Arweave will embark on the journey starting with this NFT trend. So witnessing the satisfying development of Arweave, will you consider it as a coincidence resulting from NFT, or do you think it's a new chapter to be opened of decentralized storage sector, which is about to unfold? So let's again start with Sam.
Well, I wouldn't say that the interesting thing about this is decentralized storage. I don't think that what makes NFTs or NFT storage interesting is its decentralization. I think what makes it interesting is its permanence. Because when you're buying an NFT asset, you're essentially saying that you ascribe some value to a piece of data somewhere. It's pretty obvious that if you lose that piece of data, you've got a problem. So that's kind of why people have turned to Arweave, because it's just the obvious solution to say, well, I just don't want to lose this piece of data and I want to have it referred to by this identifier. Yeah, we've sort of known that for a long time. We've been talking to some people in the NFT space about it for a year and a bit. And beginning was very slow. Like the NFT space didn't really realize, I think, the importance of this until they saw a bunch of projects where, yeah, essentially either the creators of the project just swapped out the data for something else. There was this rather entertaining one where they swapped it for rugs because it was a rug pull. They replaced the images with rugs. Or the data just got lost. And the problem is if you use a temporary storage system, even if it's decentralized, at some point, someone's going to forget to pay for it or stop paying for it because they're not incentivized to do so. This is particularly extreme if you have a reference to the centralized web, which like 25-30% now of the NFTs, they still have references to the centralized web inside them. And if you do this, because of the way the web works, you're inevitably going to lose access to the data because someone will forget to renew the domain name, or the directory structure under which it's stored will just have to change. It's kind of natural, like over a long enough period of time. That's not going to work. If I use an NFT minting service and they store the data for me, well, after, they've got their revenue from my minting, say 15 years after that, what incentive is there for them to keep those servers alive? The answer is basically zero. And so the elegant thing about using Arweave here is that you just contribute to the endowment at the beginning, and then you just don't need to look at it again. And there's some interesting consternation in the community around whether it's 200 years or more than 200 years or literally indefinite or forever. But like the basic principle, to get into that for a moment, is as the cost of storage declines, that 200 years that you've put up already becomes larger. The protocol would expect a rate of 0.5%. So as long as that number is above the other number, or the other way around, if the real world number is above 0.5%, then it doesn't in fact go on indefinitely. There's always tokens to pay for storage. And so yes, if you want to be pessimistic about it and the price of storage never declines again, then it's 200 years. But obviously the price of storage, if you look at the chart, it's a pretty massively exponentially decaying curve, actually interestingly over thousands of years, not just since the birth of computers. If you look at transcription of books, for example, and the mediums we'd used before that, it's pretty clear that the amount of effort that goes into replicating data is exponentially decaying over time. But that's a separate conversation. Anyway, yeah, that's why it's interesting to the NFT community, I think.
Thanks, Sam. So Kayla, do you want to add on to the NFT part?
The really exciting thing about NFTs being stored for at least 200 years is that sort of unlocks the potential of NFTs. Right now, mostly NFTs are pieces of art, sport, digital trading cards, things that people might want to collect. But the future of NFTs really is like we call them atomic NFTs because they will be the building blocks of the internet. And every single piece of data is going to be an atomic NFT on the decentralized web. And that way, on Arweave, you will always be able to access it. You will always be able to find it. It's not going to get moved. It's not going to get rug pulled. And really, those are the building blocks that create our apps, our data, like everything that you're going to interact with is going to be an NFT in the future, as we see it. Tied in with the attention rewards and the other concepts that we haven't even come up with. I'm sure that the most amazing project on Koi and Arweave is not going to be something that we dream up. We're giving the tools, but so those small building blocks are going to be everywhere, and you won't be able to get rid of it. So the future, is immutable.
Nice. Phil, do you have anything?
Yeah, well, just to comment on what you're saying, Kayla, about how everything could be an atomic NFT, right? At our drive, we kind of feel the same way. Any file in your drive, could be an atomic NFT. And that's something that we could do. When I heard about the whole NFT trend, it definitely did not click with me, kind of the power of that. I never saw it hitting so hard and fast, and but I guess that's that's crypto. But I think this is clearly an awesome use case for permanent storage on Arweave. And it's, really satisfying to see that. At Arweave, we've seen people use upload their NFT data for different kinds of purposes, whether it's an OpenSea drop or whether it's for decentralized games that some teams are making. And we never saw that coming at all. So for me, it's really, really exciting to just, as you mentioned, Kayla, like the things people are building that we can't, I don't think NFT data, isn't the only purpose for Arweave. I think there's everyone could benefit from permanent storage. Obviously, that's what we're trying to do at Arweave, at Arweave. But even if you look at other blockchains storing their data on Arweave, I think that's another really great use case showing what permanent pay one storage can do for other technologies. And when it comes to just NFTs in Arweave, we're really trying to take the stance of just being agnostic to whatever kind of NFT you want to create. So yes, we are working on supporting atomic koi NFTs. But if you have data that you want to put an ERC 1155 contract, great. You could point to that data stored in our drive. We want to let our users and community kind of decide, as well as let the other great developers build their own smart contracts and smart weave contracts to support those NFTs. So that's kind of our take on that. And it's very exciting. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I see all different kinds of files becoming NFTs. Where's the first EXE NFT, right? Like I think these things can happen. It's just a matter of time. And we want to support all of those use cases at our drive.
Phil, talking about supporting other chains, we are building bridges with all the other blockchains right now and allowing other people to come into the Arweave ecosystem with the products they already have, with the NFTs, with anything they have stored on Ethereum, for example. Our Ethereum bridge should be coming out very soon to have access to our drive and store your large files there, to have access to all of the other apps in the ecosystem, to earn attention rewards so that you can move back and forth if you want to put it on our drive. And then you decide, I do want to sell it on OpenSea because that's where, my audience is, or that's where the money is right now. Or Ethereum, doing well or not doing well, whatever the case may be, hop it right over to OpenSea and be able to sell it there after earning your attention rewards and having all of the benefits of being in Arweave, having that permanent storage, and it will stay there and be permanent for the next however many hundreds of years we want to talk about.
And to go back to that question of everything becoming an NFT, I think there's something interesting there about whether things will be NFTs or what we call in the community PSTs, or profit sharing tokens. So profit sharing tokens are essentially just you can think of it like an ERC20, for example, when you build a profit sharing community application, for example, like Phil's application, Arweave. If you own some of the tokens in the system, when people use it, you earn a small reward, a tip, essentially. And in doing so, you're more or less creating an APR on the holding of the token. Then you can get attention rewards from it via koi. And at the moment, there's this interesting debate as whether there should be one owner, or why you can't fractionalize that. But of course, if you have fractionalized NFTs, then you actually just have a T, right? Just a token. But I digress. I think it's an interesting question that in the ecosystem, my guess is over time, most things will be minted with a token associated with it, because there are lots of different protocols that might accrue lots of different types of value to an asset. And there's kind of no point not to actually. Minting contracts associated with your data on Arweave is free because it happens in the tags of the transaction you're already paying for.
Thanks, all. So let's just echo what Sam said a little bit. So what makes NFT interesting is not the storage, but the permanence, which really stands Arweave out for as a permanent storage network. So also like what Phil and Kayla mentioned and Sam mentioned, there Arweave, Koi, they're all building blocks in Arweave ecosystem to attract more assets and applications into the ecosystem, no matter which public chains they are from. And also the profit sharing token is kind of the core to get everything play out, which is kind of the incentive and motivation for communities and applications to run in the ecosystem. So we can see the whole underlying the blueprint of the Arweave ecosystem, and just we're going to see a lot of things blossoming in the ecosystem in the future.